Hello, my friend. Today's episode might hit home for many of you, especially those of you who carry a lot of responsibility. Whether you're leading a team, a ministry, a family, a business, there's this constant tension that we feel. How do I serve others well without losing myself in the process? If you've ever found yourself pouring into everyone else, your clients, your kids, your spouse, your community, only to realize you're running on empty, this one's for you. The episode is called Leading with Love: How to Serve Others Without Losing Yourself. I want to start by saying something really simple, but it's so easy to forget. Serving others doesn't mean neglecting yourself. In fact, the best leaders, the most Christ-centered servants, are those who have learned to lead from love, not from exhaustion, not from guilt, not from the need to prove something, but from love. And yet, so many of us get caught in this cycle of over-giving, overdoing, and over-sacrificing, thinking that that's what it means to serve well. But here's the truth. When you lead from a place of depletion, you're not leading with love. You're leading on fumes. And today, we're going to fix that. Welcome to Goals and Grace, the podcast for accomplished women who are ready to align their ambition with faith and step into their highest potential. I'm Reverend Juliet Spencer, a certified high-performance coach and former pastor, and I'm here to help you break free from imposter syndrome, embrace gratitude, and lead with clarity, purpose, and peace. Each week, I'll share faith-filled encouragement, personal stories, and proven strategies from books like High Performance Habit, as well as from my coaching program, The Purpose and Peace Pathway, to help you achieve success without apology. You'll walk away with tools to lead boldly, live intentionally, and honor the calling on your life. Let's step into our calling together. Don't forget to follow the podcast and share it with a friend who's ready to grow. So let's look at the most beautiful example of this. Jesus washing his disciples' feet in the Gospel of John, chapter 13. It's just before Passover. The air is heavy with anticipation. Jesus knows the time with his disciples is coming to an end. He's aware of the cross ahead, of the betrayal, the suffering, the weight of the world's sin. The room is tense. The disciples are confused and probably whispering among themselves, unsure of what's about to happen. So what does Jesus do? He gets up from the table, wraps a towel around his waist, and begins to wash their feet. These are the feet of his friends, the ones who have walked with him, but also the ones who will scatter and deny him. Peter, who will protest and say, "You'll never wash my feet." Judas, who will betray Jesus with a kiss. And the others, they'll run, they'll hide, they'll doubt. And still, Jesus kneels before them in love. It's such a powerful moment. In their culture, washing feet wasn't just an act of service. It was the work of a servant, the lowest of the low. And yet, here is Jesus, their teacher, their Lord, kneeling before them, taking on the role of a servant. It's shocking. It's radical. And it's love in action. But what strikes me most about it isn't just the humility, although that's huge, but it's the security from which Jesus serves. He isn't trying to prove he's humble. Scripture tells us that Jesus knew that God had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. That's the foundation of his service. He knew who he was. He knew where he came from, and he knew his purpose. And that's the difference between serving from fullness and serving from emptiness. When you serve from emptiness, you're striving, you're trying to prove something. to earn love, to fill a void. But when you're serving from fullness like Jesus, you're free. You're free to love and free to give, free to serve, not out of obligation or guilt, but out of the overflow of a heart rooted in God's love. When you know who you are in God, when your identity is rooted in love, you can serve freely without losing yourself in the process. So here's the question. Are you serving from fullness or are you serving from emptiness? Are you rooted in the love of God, secure in who you are and whose you are? Or are you pouring out from a place of depletion, trying to prove your worth? And Jesus shows us a better way, a way of love, a way of freedom, a way of serving others without losing yourself. When you know who you are in God, when your identity is rooted there in God's love, you can serve freely and you won't lose yourself in the process. But let's be real. Serving others isn't always as beautiful or as poetic as washing feet. Most of us don't wake up with a towel in hand ready to serve. We wake up to chaos, emails, problems, demands, kids whining, spouses wondering why we forgot to pick up the mail or pick up the dry cleaning. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, service starts to feel less like love and more like obligation. And sometimes that service begins to blur into self-neglect. Maybe you've been there. I know I have. You're giving and giving, but deep down, you're running on fumes. You start to feel resentful, like, why does it always fall to me? But then guilt kicks in and you think, oh, I should feel grateful. I should be stronger. I should just push through. And so you do. Until one day you realize you are pouring from an empty cup and there is nothing left to give. I saw this all the time as a pastor and with my coaching clients, especially high-capacity leaders and women of faith who have huge hearts. They love helping people. They love making an impact. But they're stuck in this tension. How do I serve others without feeling like I'm losing my mind? Like I'm losing myself? And the answer is boundaries. Can you relate? Boundaries are not barriers to love. They are the framework that helps love stay healthy. Think of boundaries like the walls of a house. They don't keep love out. They create a safe space where love can thrive. Without them, everything spills out, and before you know it, you're left with nothing but exhaustion and resentment. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're sacred. When Jesus withdrew to pray, when he rested, when he said no to the crowds, he wasn't being unloving, though I'm sure it felt like that to them. He was showing us what it looks like to stay aligned with God's will. He knew what it was to pour love out, and he knew he had to stay connected to the source of that love. And if Jesus, the Son of God, needed to rest and refill, then how much more do we? So let me ask you, where in your life do you need to create boundaries? Where are you pouring in so much that you're starting to run dry? Remember, rest isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And boundaries aren't barriers. They're the framework that helps you love well. So, how do you live this out in a practical way? How do you serve others without losing yourself? I know this is where so many of us get stuck. We want to lead with love, but we also want to protect our peace. And sometimes it feels like these two things are at odds. But believe it or not, they're not. You can do both. You can serve others and honor your own well-being. It just takes some intentional shifts. And so let me share 3 shifts that I think will help you lead with love and maintain your peace. Number 1, shift from people-pleasing to purpose serving. shift from people pleasing to purpose serving. People pleasing looks like I have to make everyone happy or I'm failing. Purpose serving looks like I'm here to do what God has called me to do, in love and not in fear. People pleasing feels like a constant hustle for approval, and it's exhausting. You're always wondering, did I do enough? Are they happy with me? But purpose serving, that feels like freedom. It's rooted in clarity and obedience. You're not chasing validation, you're standing firm in what God has called you to do. And that changes everything. One is rooted in the need for approval, and the other is rooted in obedience. When you're clear about your purpose, you stop chasing validation and you can say yes and you can say no from a place of peace. Let me say that again. When you're clear about your purpose, you stop chasing validation and you can say yes and you can say no from a place of peace. Try asking yourself this before you commit to something. Is this mine to do? Because not everything that's good is yours to carry. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is to let go of what's not yours and trust that God will raise up someone else to handle it. As someone who used to be a chronic people pleaser, I know it's hard. But one of the most faithful things you can do is to ask, is this mine to do? And is it mine to do because I've always done it? Or is it mine to do because I'm afraid that if I don't do it, someone else will? Instead, is it mine to do because I know God is asking me to do it? That's the question. Number 2, shift from hustle to holy rhythm. I know the word self-care gets thrown around a lot, but in faith-based leadership, it's not just about bubble baths and vacations. It's about rhythm. Think about Jesus' rhythm. He poured out by teaching and healing and serving, but then he pulled away. He went to the mountains to pray. He sat by the well. He rested on the boat. He went to parties with friends. He wasn't rushing from one thing to the next, trying to prove himself. He moved with intention, with purpose, and with peace. And it also meant that some people begging for his time and attention and touch didn't get helped, not in the time frame they wanted. They didn't get his attention or feel his touch. Why? Because he knew he needed time away. You were never meant to serve without refilling. That's not holiness, that's just hurry. So take time to examine your rhythm. Are you giving time for restoration? Maybe it's journaling in the morning, or maybe it's worship in the car, listening to music you love. Maybe it's a Sabbath walk where you leave your phone behind and just breathe. It doesn't have to be complicated. Start small. Start anywhere. The point isn't what you do. The point is that you do it with intention, and with the intention to refill, to re-energize, and to rest. Number 3, shift from martyrdom to mutuality. This one's big, especially for leaders who are used to being the strong one. You're not meant to do it all alone. Even Jesus had help. He had friends. He sent the disciples out 2 by 2. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but if I don't do it, who will? What if they don't do it right? And look, I get it. Letting go of control is hard. But here's the truth. When you try to do it all yourself, you're not just exhausting yourself. You're robbing others of the chance to step up and serve. You're robbing them of the joy of participation. When you allow others to serve you, you give them the gift of participation, and you make room for community. So instead of carrying everything yourself, ask, Who can I invite into this with me? Maybe it's a colleague or a friend or a family member. Maybe it's someone who's been waiting for the chance to help but didn't know how to step in. When you let others share the load, you're not just lightening your burden, you're building community. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to let other people help. So here's my challenge. Take a moment today to reflect on these shifts. Where are you stuck in people pleasing? Where is your rhythm out of sync? Where are you carrying something alone that you could share? Remember, you're not called to do it all alone. You are called to do what God has placed in your hands and to do it with love, with peace, and with grace. I'm sharing this story today because it's personal. It's tied to a painful eye-opener I had when my kids were young. It's forever burned into my memory, the time I knew something had to change. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, completely drained after another 14-hour day. My kids were waiting for me to read to them a bedtime story, but I was so exhausted. I knew that I wouldn't make it past the first page before I fell asleep myself. And in that moment, I thought, what am I doing? How did I get here? Every counseling session, every committee meeting, every hospital visit, I said yes to it all. I'd stay late at the church, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, while my kids sat in the back pew, tired and hungry, waiting for me to finish. Sunday afternoons were no better. I'd let people stop me after church, their voices blending into the hum of the crowd, while my kids tugged at my sleeve, begging to go home. I loved the people I served, but I was exhausted. The next morning, as we sat down for breakfast, I told my kids that I would be late again because of an evening meeting. And I'll never forget the look on their faces. Those big, beautiful, innocent eyes filled with disappointment. My older daughter didn't say a word, but she didn't have to. Her silence spoke volumes, and it broke my heart. I realized in that moment that I wasn't just tired. I was robbing my children of something they could never get back, time with their mom. That moment forced me to be honest with myself. Why was I so afraid to set boundaries? Was it the fear of disappointing people? Fear of being seen as less committed? I realized I'd been equating busyness with faithfulness, but that wasn't true. Faithfulness isn't about doing everything, it's about doing the right things. And that meant I had to make some changes. I began to delegate. I began to rest. I began to trust that God didn't need me to do everything. God just needed me to be faithful to the part I had been called to play. It wasn't easy. I had to learn that stepping back wasn't failure, it was faith. And I had to accept that people used to having me at their beck and call were not going to be happy with me at first. But I also knew that God was big enough to help me and to help them. And do you know what happened? At first, people were not happy. They were used to having me at their beck and call. They were used to me doing everything. But over time, something amazing happened. Others began to step up. They began to take ownership of things that I alone used to carry. They started respecting my time and even encouraged me to rest and recharge. My family got more of me, and my ministry didn't just survive, it thrived. Because when you lead with healthy boundaries, you create space for others to grow. Love without limits isn't sustainable. It turns into resentment. But love with boundaries, that's where the joy lives. That's where freedom lives. And that's where God can do God's best work. So let's pause for a moment and make this personal. I want you to take a deep breath, and if you can, close your eyes and reflect on these 3 questions. Where am I serving from? Fullness or emptiness? What do I need to release or realign? What rhythm or boundary do I need to restore peace in my leadership? Where am I serving from? Fullness or emptiness? What do I need to release or realign? And what rhythm or boundary do I need in order to restore peace in my leadership? Now, don't rush these questions. Just let them sit with you. Maybe even grab a journal later and write out your thoughts. Because here's what I know. When you serve from fullness, your leadership becomes an overflow of grace, not a drain on your energy. And that's the kind of leadership that changes lives. Let's go back to that image of Jesus washing feet. Picture it again. The towel wrapped around his waist, the water splashing softly as he kneels, the disciples watching in stunned silence. That towel was not a symbol of exhaustion. It was a symbol of love. Jesus didn't serve because he had to. He didn't serve to get their approval. He didn't serve out of emptiness. He served because he chose to. Not from a place of striving, but from strength. Not for recognition, but for relationship. And that's the kind of love that transforms everything it touches: communities, families, workplaces, and hearts. As you go into this week, lead with love, my friend. Don't lose yourself in the process. Let your love flow from presence, not pressure. Let your boundaries reflect your belief that God's plan doesn't depend on your burnout. And remember, when you fill up on God's love first, you'll always have more than enough to pour out. If today's episode spoke to you, I would love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram or send me a note through my website. Hearing your stories and reflections is one of my favorite parts of this journey. And hey, if you know someone who's been feeling stretched too thin or who's struggling with burnout, someone who says yes to everything except self-care, would you share this episode with them? You never know. The encouragement they need might just be one click away. So, my friend, keep leading with grace, keep loving with wisdom, and keep showing up for the life God wants for you. You're making an impact, and I'm cheering you on every step of the way. Until next time, be blessed.